I'm divorcing you, and I've already sold the beach house. That was how it began. No warning, no soft landing, just a blunt transactional announcement from the woman I'd been married to for 15 years. I stood by the window of my Brussels hotel room, staring out at the cloudy skyline, still holding my phone to my ear. My name is Richard Calhoun. I'm 52 years old, and for the past 2 decades, I've built a career as a commercial property negotiator based in Jacksonville, Florida. I help people protect their assets. I find the fine print they miss. I win leverage when deals feel lost. But in my own marriage, I'd let emotion replace scrutiny. Until now. The call came on the 4th day of my trip. I was in Brussels, finalizing a major warehouse acquisition. That morning, I'd just wrapped up a meeting when my phone buzzed. I expected a brief check-in. Instead, I got Lena's cool voice cutting through time zones like a blade. "Kyle and I need a fresh start," she added casually. "The house sold for a good price. The papers are signed. Kyle, her personal trainer. The guy who drove a leased car, wore designer sneakers, and once asked me how much my watch cost at a dinner party. I didn't interrupt her, didn't ask questions. I just asked, 'When did you close the sale?' 'Yesterday,' she replied. 'Buyer moves in next week.' She chuckled. 'Figured you'd be fine staying at a Marriott when you get back. You're always traveling anyway.' Her tone wasn't bitter. It was confident, like she believed I'd already lost. I ended the call quietly. No anger. No pleading. I sat at the edge of the hotel bed, watching rain trace lines across the window. Outside, people hurried beneath umbrellas, rushing toward warm cafes and late lunches. My pulse didn't spike. I'd seen things coming. The missed calls, the vague weekend trips, the shift in her tone when she said my name. I hadn't confronted her. I'd prepared because preparation, not reaction, is how you survive betrayal. I opened my laptop and typed a brief but urgent email. Subject: fraudulent property sale. Attempt recipients: Cameron Doyle, my attorney of 20 years, and Elena Brooks, my title agent. Since I started in real estate, I explained the situation clearly. The property Lena claimed to have sold wasn't legally hers to sell. What she thought was a clean break was in fact a massive legal misstep. As I pressed send, I felt no rage, just clarity. Lena thought I was the kind of man who wouldn't fight back. That was her mistake. She didn't know I'd already taken steps to protect the house nearly a year ago. She didn't know I'd been quietly safeguarding everything. In real estate, the deal isn't done until the ink is dry and the contract is airtight. In marriage, the same rules apply. And Lena had just broken the wrong contract. You can't sell what you never owned. That line kept echoing in my mind as I sat in the cafe the next morning, sipping burnt espresso, while Belgian businessmen passed by in tailored coats. 11 months earlier, I'd started noticing things: missed calls, vague weekend plans, charges for dinners I hadn't attended. I never confronted her, I just observed. And then I acted. At Cameron's office in Jacksonville, we created the Calhoun Living Trust. I transferred the Amelia Island beach house into it, listing myself as sole trustee. It was simple, legal, and completely enforceable. Lena was there when she signed the paperwork, distracted by her phone, half listening, as Cameron walked her through the bundle that included refinancing documents for a property in Tampa. She didn't ask questions, didn't read a word. "This protects us both," I told her, and technically it did, but not the way she imagined. That single signature changed everything. From that moment, the beach house was no longer jointly held. It was legally protected from any unilateral sale. I never brought it up again. I didn't need to. I watched her drift further away into Kyle's orbit. Into her own world, I waited. And I prepared. Some habits are hard to break. I've always traveled with original deeds on major deals just in case. The Amelia Island deed was in my briefcase right now, nestled between property contracts and a passport renewal form. Elena had helped with the filing. Cameron had structured the trust so airtight it could hold water. Lena may have thought she outplayed me with timing secrecy and a new lover, but she underestimated what years of negotiating with sharks had taught me. Emotion is a liability. Preparation is power. I looked out at the street below and checked my inbox. Cameron had replied already. If the house is in the trust, she has no authority. That sale won't hold, Elena confirmed. She'd flagged the property with the county recorder. No title transfers would proceed. Lena had pulled the trigger, but she'd aimed at a house that was no longer hers to sell. And soon she would realize the only thing more dangerous than betrayal is underestimating someone who lives by contracts. I didn't tell anyone I was flying home. No texts, no itinerary sent, no heads up to Lena. I landed in Jacksonville on a Saturday morning, cleared customs in a fog of jet lag and quiet determination, and rented a car without a word. The 40-minute drive to Amelia Island was filled with the familiar low-country scenery I once loved. Salt marshes, live oaks draped in Spanish moss, and the slow, steady pace of life I thought I'd be retiring into. Now it felt like the prelude to a confrontation I hadn't asked for, but was ready to finish. I pulled into the driveway just after noon, a black Mercedes. I didn't recognize Kyle's. I assumed was parked in my usual spot. The house looked the same, but something felt off. I opened the front door with my key, half expecting the locks to be changed, but they weren't. Voices drifted from the kitchen. Lena's laugh, high-pitched and practiced, followed by a man's voice. They were talking about knocking down a wall. Open concept makes all the difference in beach properties, Kyle said. My suitcase touched the hardwood floor with a soft thud. As I walked down the hallway, I found them by the kitchen island. Lena wore a flowy sundress I'd never seen holding a champagne flute, while Kyle pointed at something on a tablet. Her smile vanished when she saw me. "Richard," she said, recovering fast. "I didn't expect you back until Monday." "Clearly," I replied, glancing at Kyle, who quickly pulled his arm away from her waist. "This is awkward," he mumbled. "I should go." "Actually," I said, "you should stay. This involves you too, apparently." Lena stiffened. "Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be, Richard." I nodded slowly. "I agree, which is why I've already spoken to my attorney. The attempted sale you initiated, it's invalid." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" I calmly opened my briefcase and placed the documents on the counter. "This house hasn't belonged to you since last May. It's held in the Calhoun Living Trust. You signed the transfer yourself during those refinancing papers for the Tampa property." Remember, her hands trembled slightly as she grabbed the documents. Kyle looked over her shoulder, confused. "You said the sale was done," he whispered. It was she insisted, but the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her. "It's legally binding," I continued. "Any sale is null and void, and the buyer has been notified. The transaction is dead." Kyle backed away. "I'll wait in the car." Once we were alone, Lena's face twisted in disbelief. "You tricked me." "No," I said. "I protected my assets. You chose not to read what you signed. That's negligence." She softened her tone. "We can work something out. Split the proceeds. No need for lawyers." I shook my head. "There are already lawyers, and the buyers may file their own complaints. You started this. Lena, what happens next is your decision." Her jaw clenched. "This isn't over." I looked around the kitchen we once renovated together. "Actually, it is. There's more. And it's worse than we thought." Cameron's voice was low, steady, and laced with concern. We were seated in his office early Sunday morning. The building was empty. All paralegals and interns gone for the weekend, leaving only silence and the weight of documents laid out across the mahogany desk. "After your email, I had my investigator do a little digging," Cameron continued, sliding a folder toward me. Inside were statements, receipts, and property records I'd never seen. Lena's been busy. He pointed to the transfers, $170,000, quietly siphoned from our joint savings account into one under her name over the past year. "That's our emergency fund," I said, my voice cold. Cameron nodded. "She's using it to fund a new business fitness boutique in Savannah. Signed lease agreements under both her name and Kyle's." My breath caught. So this wasn't impulsive. This was planned. Meticulous. I flipped to the next page, a preliminary agreement on retail space downtown. Then another branding materials, architectural renderings, even website mock-ups. Lena and Kyle hadn't just fallen into an affair. They'd been building something on my dime. "Here's the kicker," Cameron said, sliding over one last page. "The buyer of your beach house. It's a shell company, registered in Georgia, owned by Jason Bennett, Kyle's brother." I muttered. Cameron nodded grimly. "Their plan was to acquire the house under market value through Jason, then flip it after you were forced to negotiate a buyback or forced to sell out of desperation." The pieces clicked together like a cruel puzzle. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about a fresh start. It was about capital extraction and profit. They had used our marriage as a financial launch pad. My stomach turned not from heartbreak, but from the sheer cold-blooded nature of it. "What are our options?" I asked. "We already locked the property," Cameron said. "But we have more leverage now. We can freeze joint accounts, and we can build a case for fraud criminal if necessary." I nodded, more resolute than ever. "I don't want her in jail, but I won't be robbed blind either." Cameron slid a legal pad in front of me. "Then let's propose a settlement, fair but firm. Return 60% of the funds. Relinquish all claims to the beach house. No claim to her business, and no criminal charges if she accepts." I stared down at the empty signature line, knowing exactly how I'd respond. "Send it," I said, "and prepare for court. She has one chance to walk away clean." That was how Cameron opened our Monday morning meeting as we finalized the divorce settlement proposal. His tone was professional, but underneath it, I could hear the quiet warning. I reviewed the document line by line. Lena would return 60% of the funds she transferred from our accounts, forfeit all claim to the Amelia Island Beach House and any properties under the Calhoun Trust, and in exchange I would waive any right to her new business venture and agree not to pursue criminal charges. "You're sure this is fair?" I asked. Cameron nodded. "More than fair. If she has any sense, she'll accept it." I left the documents with him and returned to the beach house where the ocean wind was strong enough to rattle the shutters. My phone buzzed that afternoon. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail a few minutes later. Cameron called. Her attorney just responded. He said, "He says you're bluffing. They believe the trust won't hold up. They want to go to court." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. "Then we file everything." By the end of the day, Cameron submitted the emergency motion to freeze all remaining joint accounts and any attempt to transfer or liquidate shared assets. The county clerk marked the beach house as contested property under court protection, though in reality the trust had already locked it down. Lena's lawyer was playing checkers. We were playing chess. And he'd just stepped into a trap he didn't see coming. That evening, I sat on the deck with a legal pad going over every financial tie. We had joint insurance, utilities, retirement accounts, auto payments. The more I untangled, the more I realized how much she had been chipping away behind the scenes. I canceled our joint gym membership, pulled my name from any shared accounts, and restructured my payroll deposits. Every move was clean surgical. My phone continued to buzz Lena, her sister, and once from a number I recognized as Kyle's gym. I didn't answer any of them. They had made their decisions. Now they would live with the consequences. The next morning, I returned to Cameron's office with a final list of documents. "If she calls you directly," I told him, Don't negotiate. She missed that window. From here on out, we play this by the book. Cameron nodded. You gave her the reasonable path, Richard. She chose the courtroom. Tell your brother to pull out of the deal or face federal charges. That was the line I delivered to Kyle as he stood in my living room, nervously shoving a gym bag full of clothes into his arms. He had returned to the house alone that afternoon, maybe thinking he could salvage some of his belongings. Instead, he found me waiting. I was just here to grab my stuff, he said quickly. I didn't move. Where's Lena? I asked. At her sister's. She said you were trying to ruin her. I almost laughed at the irony. Is that what she told you, that I'm the villain in this story? Kyle wouldn't meet my gaze. She said, you were controlling, that you left her behind while you traveled the world, that she felt trapped, and the business you two were planning to open with money from the sale of my house. That was all my fault, too. His eyes widened. It was all the confirmation I needed. You can tell Lena that her settlement offer is at Cameron Doyle's office. She has 48 hours to accept it. If not, we proceed with a contested divorce and criminal charges for fraud. He looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. Fraud, he asked. Finally, voice shaky. Attempting to sell property she doesn't own, transferring funds without consent, opening a business using misappropriated assets. Take your pick. Kyle's mouth opened, then closed. He slung the bag over his shoulder. I'll tell her, he said quietly. One more thing, I added. Tell Jason, your brother, that if he doesn't formally withdraw his offer on this house by end of day, we'll name him in the fraud investigation as a co-conspirator. That got his attention. He turned pale. He didn't know what she was doing. Then he should withdraw. Now, I interrupted. Or his name goes in the file. Kyle didn't respond. He walked out, and I watched through the blinds as he got in the Mercedes and sped off. Then an hour later, Cameron called. Jason Bennett just contacted the real estate agent. He said, he's rescinded the offer. We have it in writing. I nodded silently, standing in the now empty house. I changed the locks that evening, deactivated the old security system, and installed a new one with external cameras and remote access. When I was done, I ordered dinner from the seafood place Lena and I used to go to our date night tradition. I ate alone on the deck, watching the waves come in slow and steady. It wasn't joy I felt. It was certainty. That feeling you get when you've drawn your line in the sand, and no one dares cross it again. We're prepared to settle, her lawyer said, eyes flicking nervously toward Lena, who sat rigid beside him in the conference room. She hadn't looked at me once since walking in. It was 3 weeks after that confrontation with Kyle, and everything we needed to prove had already been documented, reviewed, and compiled. We weren't in court yet, but the pre-trial hearing had been set. Today was their last chance to avoid it. Cameron remained calm, professional. Before we begin, he said we'd like to enter 3 items into record. He slid the documents across the polished table. First, the deed to the Calhoun Living Trust, confirming sole ownership of the Amelia Island property. Second, the financial records showing $170,000 siphoned from our joint accounts. And third, the most damning of all, a signed affidavit from Jason Bennett, admitting the beach house transaction was part of a plan to acquire the property at below market value using a shell company. The opposing attorney skimmed the papers, and I saw the shift in his posture. His confidence crumbled right there like a developer realizing the land he bought is on a sinkhole. He leaned in to whisper to Lena. Her face remained blank, jaw tight, but her eyes flickered just once toward the documents in front of her. After a long silence, her lawyer cleared his throat. We're willing to accept the proposed terms. Cameron nodded. To confirm, Lena Calhoun will return $100,000 of the misappropriated funds, relinquish all claims to the Amelia Island property and all other trust-held assets. In exchange, Mr. Calhoun waives any right to the business venture and agrees not to pursue criminal charges. Lena finally spoke. And if I don't? Her voice was cold, but cracked slightly at the end. Cameron didn't flinch. Then we proceed to trial and present this evidence to the district attorney. Fraud over $100,000 carries substantial penalties in Florida. Her lawyer placed a hand on her wrist and whispered again. They left the room to confer privately. 17 minutes passed. When they returned, Lena's expression hadn't changed, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. We accept the terms, her lawyer repeated. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I signed my name, where indicated watched as Lena signed hers, that signature. I'd seen it on birthday cards, tax returns, anniversary notes. It felt strange watching it now close the final chapter of a life we'd built. There were no final words, no tearful goodbyes, just silence and the unmistakable sound of resolution. The house stood still. The ocean kept moving. It had been 6 months since the divorce was finalized, and I'd spent that time reshaping not just the walls around me, but the life I lived within them. The deck boards were new, the kitchen fully remodeled, the siding reinforced against storms, and the windows upgraded to hurricane-resistant panels. But those were just the visible changes. The real transformation ran deeper. Every hammer swing, every dollar spent, every blueprint adjusted was part of something symbolic, an act of reclaiming. The beach house, once a shared dream, had become my sanctuary. It no longer echoed with Lena's voice or held shadows of our past. It simply existed, mine and mine alone. Most mornings now began the same. I'd wake just before sunrise, make coffee in the kitchen I redesigned from the studs up, and step onto the wraparound deck to watch the Atlantic yawn into the day. The rhythm of the waves had a way of settling me, reminding me that the tides didn't care who betrayed who or which contracts were broken. Nature ran on its own code, one that never lied or manipulated. Just truth. Word had filtered down through mutual acquaintances. Lena and Kyle did open their boutique gym in Savannah, though it wasn't quite the sleek, high-end facility their vision boards promised. The space was smaller, the marketing was weak, and business, I heard, was difficult. I didn't revel in that news. There was no thrill in watching someone struggle, even someone who'd once betrayed me. What I felt instead was distance. What they were doing simply didn't matter to me anymore. Their chapter in my story had closed. The $100,000 Lena returned as part of the settlement had gone straight into a new investment. I bought a small but reliable commercial building in downtown Jacksonville, a low-risk property with long-term tenants and steady monthly rent. No drama, no emotion, just income. I kept the deed in my new trust structure and set up automatic payments through a new bank account, separate from anything Lena ever touched. Financially, I was safer now than I'd been in years. One Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed as I was watching a pelican dive headfirst into the surf. It was Monica, my title agent and longtime friend. "You ready for the next one?" she asked, with a smile in her voice. "What do you have?" I replied. She described a commercial lot west of town. Good zoning, minimal risk. We agreed to meet Friday. After we hung up, I stared out at the sea a little longer. I realized I hadn't felt this grounded, this steady, in a long time. The house no longer felt like a reminder of what I'd lost. It felt like a monument to what I'd rebuilt. I'd never planned to live alone at this stage in life, but the solitude didn't sting. It clarified. There were no lies in the crashing surf, no half-truths in the rising sun, just honesty in motion. I finished my coffee, stepped inside, and closed the sliding glass door behind me. The day was beginning, and so was everything else. Looking back now, I realize that betrayal doesn't always come with yelling or slamming doors. Sometimes it arrives through a calm voice over the phone, disguised as confidence cloaked in entitlement. But what matters most isn't how someone betrays you, it's how you choose to respond. I didn't shout. I didn't collapse. I prepared. I protected what was mine, and I followed through. What I learned through all of this is simple emotion should never replace foresight. Love, trust, partnership, they're important. But so is protecting yourself, your future, your hard-earned stability. Just because you care about someone doesn't mean you should leave the doors to your life unlocked. And just because someone says they'll stay forever doesn't mean they will. Life teaches you to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. That's not cynicism, it's wisdom. Earned the hard way. If there's one message I want to leave with you, it's this: never feel guilty for putting safeguards around your peace. Whether it's in your finances, your relationships, or your boundaries, protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's responsible. And if someone tries to take what you've built, you don't need to destroy them to win. You just need to stand your ground with integrity, patience, and the truth on your side. To anyone out there going through something similar, know this: you're not weak for being blindsided, but you become strong the moment you choose not to let that betrayal define your next chapter. Start protecting your future today, even if you think you'll never need to, because someday it might be the very thing that saves you.